Welcome back. Time now for hashtag Africa Focus feature here on News and Views. This is a part of a show where we take a closer look at stories shaping the continent of Africa. And this morning we turn our attention to Niger, where 2 years after a military coup seized power that ultimately toppled the country's elected leadership, General Abdurrahmani Tiani and his ruling CNSP promised to restore sovereignty, kick out foreign forces, and put Nigerians first. Fast forward to today, the country has exited ECOWAS. It has turned its back on France and the West, essentially. I don't think it's just France alone, but just the West. And they've pivoted more towards Russia and its allies. But this morning was the question, has anything really changed for ordinary people in that part of the continent? Are citizens safer? Are they freer? Are they a bit more prosperous than they were 2 years ago? Or has military rule merely deepened instability and isolation? And to unpack this, we're joined by Africa Affairs analyst Koffi Kouakou, who's been tracking political transitions and power dynamics across the Sahel region. Koffi, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to News and Views. Really appreciate you giving us the time this morning. And good morning.
Yes, good morning, Salahelo, and thanks for the invitation.
Pleasure's all ours. I think let's kickstart the conversation with where Niger is at this current moment, 2 years after that coup. What is your overall assessment? Have the military rulers delivered on any of their promises? Has it become what we thought it would be? Especially looking at the transition of power. What do you make of the last 2 years and Niger?
Well, listen, it's exactly 2 years and 4 days, and on July the 26th, 2023, that this Niger and the world and West Africa witnessed a dramatic change, a military coup, as you said, that political shift that really ousted President Mohamed Bazoum, and then of course General Abdurrahman Tiani, who took over with his team, have tried as much as they can to bring about some kind of stability. And then at the heart of this whole coup, there are many things that were not running well. The fact that the security landscape was a big issue. So they shifted, the new military general, Tiani, shifted from Western troops telling them that they're securing a country that's very vast and large. In fact, Niger is a little bit bigger than South Africa. Niger about 1,267,000 square kilometers, and South Africa is 1.202. So it's a large place to really monitor and then check, especially in terms of the security landscape. And the Nigerians were thinking that those who they've entrusted to help do that, the French forces, and of course the US troops as well, were going to help them deal with the jihadists' activities in the northern part of the country. But they didn't do so. And I think this is what really upset the generals who took over. And then what we know is, based on that kind of security issues, they shifted their alliances to creating very quickly a consolidated group of 3 countries that included both, of course, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. And they wanted to be really secure because in the Sahel, the jihadists were moving from place to place in the Sahel, so it was very difficult to really control them. And what these 3 countries did was to form an alliance, a security alliance first, because that's the most important. But what has changed is they've moved a little bit beyond the security alliance, and I'm sure many of you listeners may have heard that they're now creating a new development bank. Last week, they put the sort of finishing touch, at least on paper. But what is also important is that, of course, you can't expect, anybody in the right mind would expect that things will dramatically change in 2.5 years needs help. And I think sometimes the propaganda saying that a military junta is not doing a better job than a sort of so-called democratically elected president, former president Mohamed Bazoum, who's still, in fact, in custody, is a little bit misleading. So at this stage, it's not easy for the people in Niger. They've been living, I mean, they've been into strife for so many, many, many years. In fact, centuries under French control. So they're now trying to figure out how do we get out of this control from the French, but also from the Americans in general, from the West, and
Mm,
finding new partners like Russia and China to figure out how they can exercise their sovereignty. I think this is the biggest deal. And in fact, because of that, those three nations, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, have now become a symbol of economic, not just economic freedom, but political freedom. And this geopolitical symbolism is now struggling, identifying into the struggle for African sovereignty, which is almost, we haven't seen this for a long time. The idea that democratic governments were helping Africa didn't really pan out, because if you do a clear audit, we can see that African nations being under democratic rules are still going through worst case and worst case and worst case.
mm, Very, very important you mentioned that, because you're going to touch a bit on my point. One of the military junta's loudest pledges was, as you mentioned, to restore sovereignty, and most importantly, to kick out French forces out of Niger. Now that France is gone, we saw a change in alignment. We're seeing Russia come in. Has this power shift, brought, I think, a more equal partnership, a bit more security, or has it just changed the logos on the military uniforms, so to speak?
Well, I mean, it's change, as you know, Salahelo, it's not easy. It takes a bit of time. What they're doing is in 2.5 years, not even 2.5 years, 2 and 4 days, 2 years and 4 days, it's that you need to put the plumbing together. Getting rid of all the colonial infrastructures is not easy. First of all, diplomatic, you need to have a diplomatic realignment. And this diplomatic realignment with other countries, especially with Russia, will take a bit of time. Not only diplomatic realignment with outside to help you secure the country. I mean, security is probably the most important issue at this stage. So we can't expect everything to go very nicely. Everything will be democratic. No. And in fact, the people themselves were really, you have this very citizen, very popular uprising of people saying, we just don't want the French anymore. We want to try a different way of going. So even if they've changed the badges, the logos, and so forth, the people in the Sahel are ready to go through a much tougher time and then realize their sovereignty rather than still be under the thumb and the chokehold of the French. And I think this is something that's difficult for many people to understand, that they'll rather pay the price for that now and be a bit more freer. However, they know that their next partnership and the realignment they're making, they need to be a little bit more vigilant, be savvy enough to figure out that, of course, they're not going to be eye to eye with Russia. Russia is a very powerful nation. The Chinese are also very powerful, but they're playing a game where at least they have something to say about the present and the future of their nations.
And I want to wrap up this conversation with, I think, just your assessment, just looking at the geopolitics of the Sahel region, because ultimately this makes up only a part of a bigger picture. You mentioned Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso with, the famous Ibrahim Traore, who have now left ECOWAS and are forming their own bloc. Just your assessment, general assessment on that region. Can we say this is a rise of a new anti-Western alliance in the Sahel? And ultimately, what does it mean for African unity and stability?
This is a very powerful and important question, yes. In fact, I wouldn't even use the term anti-Western. The idea that these people are anti-Western is just a little bit misplaced, because if you
Hmm.
still look at it, they're still using Western infrastructure, Western systems, Western languages. All these three countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, are still using French, although they've downgraded French, not as an official language per se, but French is still very dominant in whatever they do. They're speaking French. It's helping them to do business around the world. So this is a very powerful example to say that they're not quite anti-French, because if they were, they would have probably shifted into something else, but they have to do it progressively. Now, back to the core of your question itself, is that they are now attempting to find new ways to become, not just democratically sovereign, but sovereign in large measure away from the whole colonial yoke. And this is why, in short, Niger has changed from being a Western partner to becoming some kind of a frontier of alternative power alignment in Africa. And it sends a strong signal to ECOWAS. You remember the Economic Commission of West African States, which wanted, in fact, they were going to be used by the French and the West to really topple all these three countries so that they get back into, again, the colonial yoke. But what has happened is they're trying to see if they can move from the internal challenges that are dealing with poverty to insurgency to the current leadership state. So it's a big stake in the future. And it's not quite easy to be able to make this happen in 2 years and 4 days. So they will start with security first. And these are military people. And they understand that if you don't have power using the military or other means, you won't be able to secure that prosperity going forward, and then making sure that Niger or Mali or Burkina Faso, and as you know, in Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traore has also become a huge symbol for the youth across West Africa, but it means a lot to the rest of Africa. And people are now identifying, especially young people, identifying in people like Ibrahim Traore. And you can see on social media, on different communication, people are just making Ibrahim Traore a sort of a messiah almost, to really help lead some kind of, new Africa prosperity. But it's going to take time because the instability is so deep that they have to do a lot of work to get out of these, this old colonial yoke. But these new alliances, hopefully, will be able to meet their future. And we're hoping that Niger will be able to be part of this so that it sends a signal to the rest of the continent. And the whole continent is now watching and learning.
Most definitely. Koffi, Kouakou, thank you so much for joining us on our hashtag Africa feature. And I think giving us a sober analysis of Niger 2 years after that coup. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
World-class financial services only at